How many states did you hunt last year?
9 or 10. It was 9. I think 9.
That's a lot. What was that like?
Yeah. Man, it was wild. I mean, it was kind of the best and worst season of my life in a certain way. It was the best in that I got to experience this wildly different set of locations and people and deer hunting situations, all in the same fall. I got to see it all. I got to hunt the deep south. I got to hunt the far northeast. I got to hunt the far west. I got to hunt some of the best places in the Midwest. I got to really experience it all. And that had been a thing that for a long time I'd strived to do. I always thought, hosting the Wired Hunt podcast and trying to speak to people about whitetail hunting, I always felt that it was important that I experience a little bit of what everybody else listening has experienced too. So I wanted to be able to speak to our audience and have some kind of personal experience to say, hey, you know what? I kind of know what you're dealing with in Alabama now. Or I've kind of actually seen what it's like over there now in Nebraska. Or when you talk to me about what it's like in the Northeast, well, yeah, I've got a little taste of that now. On the flip side though, it kind of felt like the worst season because I just stretched myself too thin. It was nuts. There was, over the course of like a 2-month period, I was gone 7 weeks, I think. So I hardly saw my kids and my family, and that was tough. And then I think because of that, and because of all the different sets of expectations you put on yourself when you're trying to produce work out of this, just like took a lot of the fun out of it. And it was very much just trying to refigure out, how do I get back to hunting just for the pure joy of it and try to find ways to remove like the stressors, because I'd gotten so obsessed with it and so goal oriented that I was finding myself like I was last year, going to all these really cool places that, so many people would look at as like dream trips. And I was in the back of my mind, not willing to say it out loud, but in the back of my mind, like kind of dreading it, like didn't even want to be there for some of these parts. And I realized that's like a shame. Like that's a damn shame. So coming out of that now, I'm in a kind of trying to reset like what all this should look like for me, and how can I do this in a way that I can still push myself as a hunter, still learn new things, still achieve whatever goals I have from a hunting perspective, but also find a way to not lose sight of why I got into this thing in the first place.
Lights, camera,
follow the trail.
Ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
The Exodus Podcast,
your source for all things whitetail.
All right, welcome, Mark. Thanks for hopping on here today. When we were just talking here briefly, there was you gave us a fair warning, kind of. So you gave us you're using Starlink, and there's sometimes drop-offs. But I'm also on Starlink, and I do have 100% view, so I usually don't have any drop-offs. So that 3% does make a difference.
It does. It really does. What's crazy is I'm at my cabin out here in Idaho where we had zero internet until I got Starlink, and we have no trees around. So I have nothing around. But the problem is the only part of my roof I can access without needing like full-blown climbing gear does block out like 5% of the sky. So you would think that with that little interference, we'd be in great shape, but somehow I still get these occasional drops. So it's great I can stream shows, I can do all my regular work, but anything live, a live podcast or streaming live TV or something, that's the only time I notice the problem. So I can't complain too much. I'm 100 yards off the edge of the national forest with all sorts of wild stuff around me. So to have that slight inconvenience, I guess, is pretty good considering what they had to deal with here 100 years ago or 20.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about perspective there, because quite literally, just even a handful of years ago, you would kind of be SOL right there in terms of working. But here you are, you're able to work remotely in a place that I'm sure you want to be.
Yeah. So it's all relative, right?
Yeah. So do you miss Michigan?
So yes and no. I don't miss it when we first get out here. So we usually come out in April or early May, and then we stay till August. And usually by the time, early spring arrives, I'm really chomping at the bit to get out and do the Western stuff. So the fishing, the hiking, the boating, the camping, all that kind of stuff. But usually by the 1st of July, like right when I was in Michigan, you would get that first good, velvet kind of scouting night in. That's when the itch really kicks in and I start really missing it. So then by the time August rolls around, I'm dying to get back. So it works out really good because I I get refreshed. I really want to get back to the Midwest. I get there in August. I'm diving in crazy. And then all through the fall, I'm hunting like a madman. And then by the time January arrives, I'm kind of burnt out on that. And I can take a deep breath and then get recharged with the Western stuff. So it's been a good balance for me, having these two kind of sides to my life to constantly flip back and forth and recharge.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And so you said go back to the Midwest. You didn't necessarily say Michigan. So when you think whitetails, do you still miss the Michigan whitetail, or is it more like the Midwest?
Yeah, good point. I wouldn't say it's the Michigan whitetail particularly that I'm missing. It's just whitetails in general. If home was Iowa or Ohio or something like that, I'd be even more excited to get back. But I will tell you, I mean, as much as I like to kind of complain about Michigan, I do love just like the local whitetail stuff. Even though we don't have as good a deer hunting as you guys have, I still get pumped to see bucks behind the house in August 15th or something, like seeing velvet deer. Even though it might be like 110-inch deer, I'm still really excited about those drives around the neighborhood at night. After being away from it, you appreciate when you come back, like the smell of corn growing in a summer field. You appreciate like the sound of the peepers and the frogs and stuff at night, and all those things that you don't have out here. There's certain things that they kind of fade into the noise when you live in it all the time. So like when I lived in Michigan all year round, I never even noticed those things. It was just what you're always surrounded by. But then when you take off for 3 months or something, you come back like, oh wow, this is cool, and this is cool, and I like that. So those are the little things I've started to kind of pick up on.
Do you have any more like future plans to do any Western whitetail stuff while you're in Idaho? I mean, I know that there was the tragedy of a couple of years ago of all the I say tragedy because you had so many mishaps there with some of those public hunts. But do you have any future plans of doing any more Western whitetail stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be something I'll do every year in some form or fashion. Now, the last 2 years I've hunted Idaho. This year I didn't get it. I don't have an Idaho tag yet because this is like a long story, but the very short version of it is basically made a deal with my wife to swap out my September whitetail hunt for a fishing trip instead. So basically like my deer hunts are my work trips, right? And I love it, but they are work trips. And I got to thinking that having one trip a year that wasn't a work trip would be nice. And so that was what that whitetail hunt had kind of been. Like me and my buddy Josh would go to Idaho and we'd be hunting, but we kind of viewed it as like that one trip a year. We could kind of add in some fishing and do some different things. And we realized last year, as much fun as the hunting was, we had like 10 other trips the rest of the year and so many other days we'd be doing that, but we'd have no time to like do a relaxing fishing fun trip. Most of the fun we were having on that trip actually was the fishing we were doing at lunch in the middle of the day. And so we said, maybe we just need to do like a 4 or 5 day trip, just that, give ourselves like a little break like that to do this. So I made a deal. I said, okay, if I don't hunt the first week of September for whitetails, can I do a week fishing instead and actually take like a vacation? So that's the idea right now. But I'm already in my head scheming. I'm like, man, I really do want to figure out a way to still get that Western whitetail hunt. And how can I still get both? So now I'm in the brainstorming phase to see if I can have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I should say though, I am hunting 2 other Western states that are Western/plains. Like I am going to hunt Nebraska and I am going to hunt North Dakota for sure. So that it kind of still checks that same box.
Yeah, absolutely. I know just from, doing this stuff, whatever you want to call ourselves, hunting personalities, working in this space, that reset once every 12 months, like it is much needed. And there's guys out there that say they can hunt for, 120 days or 140 days, 6 months straight. Like I'm not one of those guys. I can go for so long and then I need that time. Like, okay, whitetail season is done or it's not here yet. Let's focus on something else for just a few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And I used to feel guilty about that. Like I don't remember who it was who said this, but I read an article or listened to some, one of the experts, maybe this was 10 years ago or something, when I was very heavy and like really trying to ramp up and like really figure this stuff out. And I was earlier in that kind of journey, I guess. And I remember hearing that. And this person said, basically, like, if you want to be a great deer hunter, there's no time, there's no room for anything else. If you have any other activities, if you go boating in the summer, if you go play beach volleyball, if you do this or that, like you are doing yourself a disservice. You're not a real deer hunter. You're not going to be great. And I remember hearing that and taking that to heart. and then thinking, okay, well then I shouldn't be doing these other things. Or if I did, I was almost like feeling guilty for doing it. In the last couple of years, I've come to realize that I think that's baloney. And maybe for some people that's the case, and that's okay if that really does it for you. But I've found for me, to be a hardcore whitetail hunter, I also need to be a hardcore something else too, to keep that balance in my life. So yeah, that's what's worked for me. And I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah, I think I know who said that, but I don't want to say who.
Yeah, there's a name that comes to mind.
But to each of their own. And I think it's tough because it's sometimes very challenging to find balance when it's something that is 365 in terms of the conversations you're having every single day, and then during the fall of what you're actually doing. Definitely creates some interesting dynamics. But let's talk a little bit about your last year. I think that, how many states did you hunt last year?
9 or 10. It was 9. I think 9.
That's a lot. What was that like?
Yeah. Man, it was wild. I mean, it was kind of the best and worst season of my life in a certain way. It was the best in that I got to experience this wildly different set of locations and people and deer hunting situations, all in the same fall. I got to see it all. I got to hunt the deep south. I got to hunt the far northeast. I got to hunt the far west. I got to hunt some of the best places in the Midwest. I got to really experience it all. And that had been a thing that for a long time I'd strived to do. I always thought, hosting the Wired Hunt podcast and trying to speak to people about whitetail hunting, I always felt that it was important that I experience a little bit of what everybody else listening has experienced too. So I wanted to be able to speak to our audience and have some kind of personal experience to say, hey, you know what? I kind of know what you're dealing with in Alabama now. Or I've kind of actually seen what it's like over there now in Nebraska. Or when you talk to me about what it's like in the Northeast, well, yeah, I've got a little taste of that now. So then, I'd aspired to have this set of experiences across, as wide of a set of the nation as I could, so I could relate to, folks across the country. And I got that. I got to experience the North, the South, the East, West, everything in between. I learned a ton. I was challenged in a lot of ways. I got to meet a lot of interesting people. So I think I grew as a hunter in really substantial, exciting ways. So for that reason, it was the best season. On the flip side, though, it kind of felt like the worst season because I just stretched myself too thin, and it was nuts. There was, over the course of like a 2-month period, I was gone 7 weeks, I think. So I hardly saw my kids and my family, and that was tough. And then I think because of that, and because of all the different sets of expectations you put on yourself when you're trying to produce work out of this, it just like took a lot of the fun out of it. And it was very much, it just I kind of had an epiphany this past season, and kind of have been going through it in the off season this year, just trying to refigure out, how do I get back to hunting just for the pure joy of it, and try to find ways to remove like the stressors, because I'd gotten so obsessed with it and so goal oriented that I was finding myself like I was last year, going to all these really cool places that, so many people would look at as like dream trips. And I was in the back of my mind, not willing to say it out loud, but in the back of my mind, like kind of dreading it, like didn't even want to be there for some of these parts. And I realized that's like a shame. Like that's a damn shame. And so coming out of that now, I'm in a kind of, I don't know, trying to reset like what all this should look like for me, and how can I do this in a way that I can, still push myself as a hunter, still learn new things, still achieve whatever goals I have from a hunting perspective, but also find a way to not lose sight of why I got into this thing in the first place, and not lose sight of, the relationships that I built, as I got into hunting, right? I mean, a big part of why I loved hunting was spending time with my family in the woods or going on trips with my buddies. And in recent years, I've gotten so busy chasing this goal or that goal or doing this project or this project that I've missed out on the trips with my friends. I don't go to my family deer camp hardly at all anymore because the hunting there isn't very good. And I can't, check off whatever box I need to from a content or work perspective. And I'm not going and doing the family thing. And I have kind of finally had this epiphany that that's ridiculous. And I don't want to miss those things anymore. And maybe that means I'm not going to kill as many mature bucks as other people do in a given year. But I'm realizing maybe that doesn't matter as much to me as I used to think it did. So that's where I'm at right now. And that's what I think this last season helped me see.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting perspective on why we hunt. I mean, it's so personal, and everybody's journey and evolution is so different. But with that being said, do you think that we put too much pressure or make whitetail hunting or hunting in general too goal oriented? And I guess, do you think that puts the future of hunting or new hunters or younger hunters at any kind of danger of like dropping out?
So I want to be careful not to speak for other people, right? Because other people might feel differently than I do. But I will say that I think that has been for me. And I've been preaching this. I'm as much of a problem as anybody. Like for years on Wired to Hunt, I've preached like, you got to be hard charging. You got to cut no corners. Don't take any time off. Don't come in for lunch. Do whatever it takes. Very much the work harder, no excuses when it comes to deer hunting. You have to get that buck. You have to achieve that goal, et cetera, et cetera. And for that's very much my personality type in a lot of ways, and how I've achieved, whatever I've achieved in my life. So I think those are good things in many cases. But for me, at least, I have realized that maybe has gone too far with deer hunting. And I've gotten so much of like who I am wrapped up into if I kill a deer or not, or if, I'm looked at as a good deer hunter or something like that. And I'm starting to realize how ridiculous that is for me, at least, and how much stress that's put on me, how much hunting has gone from like this fun thing to go out there and do to instead like this seeming like in the back of my mind feels like a life or death situation. And if I screw something up, it feels like the whole world's crashing down around me and I've let people down. And, it has grown into this thing that is way heavier than I think it should be probably. And so it has had a negative impact on me for sure. Now, do I still love it? Yeah. Do I still get super stoked about going out there when I see that first big buck walking through a bean field in the summer? I'm going to be very, very excited about it. Do I still want to chase big deer and see mature bucks and all those things? Yes. But I think there's got to be some kind of middle ground where you can do that and you can enjoy those challenges and you can push yourself, but then also not be miserable on November 9th because you've hunted 9 days straight, 13 hours a day in the tree stand. You haven't seen that one buck you're after. There's got to be a way to do that, but still keep the joy in it and still have the fun and the excitement of it without that being a stressor. I know there are people that can just be out there enjoying that as a good time and not look at like it's some covert operation that's, going to make or break the year. So I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. And I do think that, at least speaking for myself, I've always tried with Wired to Hunt to be a helper. I don't know if that's the right word, but I wanted to help people, educate people, inspire people, relate to people. And as part of that, I've definitely preached a lot of this same kind of stuff I talked about that probably, to your point, Chad, probably has put a lot of pressure on people, probably has made a lot of people feel like they have to, if you aren't out there grinding as hard as, Mark said he was, or as Andy May is, or as John Eberhart or whoever is, I imagine there's a lot of aspiring hunters who got into it and who really love it. And then they hear from us or they see other people doing it and they see how successful certain people are. And it definitely makes them feel inadequate or, there's two sides of it, right? It can inspire, but it can also do the opposite. And I think there's probably a little bit of both happening, but I'm hoping maybe there's a way to discover this place in the middle where we can keep grinding, but also find a way to keep that joy and remove some of the stress. I don't know where that is. I'm figuring it out.
That's a tough balance for sure. And I think the interesting thing is with a lot of these people that are whitetail nuts are some of the most goal-oriented people on earth. So like, how do you not tie a goal to your number one passion? Those two things go hand in hand. So let me know when you figure it out, because I'll be listening with both ears open.
I will. I'll keep you posted if I figure it out.
For sure. So part of that hunting excursion this past year when you're bouncing around all across the country and you wanted to hunt basically with the quote unquote experts of that region. What was that like going into and seeing how other people break down an area versus to what you were used to?
I mean, it took an idea that I knew was true, like intellectually, and it made it very real. So I'd always known that like there's a million ways to skin a cat when it comes to hunting, right? There's so many different ways to do it. And you also always hear about people complaining or saying like, well, that doesn't work in my neck of the woods. These guys in Iowa, well, what they do, it doesn't work in Maine, or that doesn't work down here in Alabama. So I've also heard that. And so going out there and actually meeting these people and seeing what their deer population looks like and what their habitat looks like and how these people have figured it out. I mean, it was just very eye-opening and made all of that very real. Everything is, I mean, there's a deer is a deer in certain ways. Like there are absolutely some consistencies that translate, whether it's Maine, Michigan, or Montana, Alabama, Arkansas, Ohio. Like there's certain things that are the same. But I do feel like imagine like a mixing board, right? You've seen like DJs use mixing boards, and maybe there's like 5 different of these like sliders on the mixing board, right? And those 5 sliders are all the same. Like deer care about this, let's say pressure. Deer care about this, let's say the wind. Deer care about this, let's say that's having a food source. So whatever, there's a handful of these consistent things. But the volume on that slider is very different in many different ways across the country. And so that was something that really stood out to me. And so you really need to be incredibly adaptable to jump from place to place and figure it out. And I was fortunate to be able to go to each of these new places and spend a day with a local to really pick up on what those regional idiosyncrasies, regional things are.
Our audience will know.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was really cool. I got to meet with people that are great at what they do. And probably if you took a lot of these people and put in the same room, they'd all think that the other person's crazy because they do it so differently, but they all do it well and they all have success. And that's pretty neat to see in real life.
Yeah, for sure. I could imagine. I think that happens all too often in all walks of life, where everyone thinks they're a lot different than what the reality is once you slow down and start breaking down all the different things. But yeah, that's so. What was one of the most surprising things? I mean, there had to be at some point like, wow, I did not really anticipate to be this hard, or density to really be this low, and this is what it looks like. What was one of the most just kind of surprising things that you saw during your travels?
So the most surprising to me would have been probably, I mean, there's a lot, but maybe Maine. I mean, you hear a lot about how legendary Maine is, and I know it is. I know it can be, as far as like big bodied deer and tough terrain. But it was even tougher than I realized. I mean, it was a grind hunting the way we hunted up there, which was, in the mountains, in the snow, tracking deer down on foot, like following their tracks to try to catch up to them. And that was a way of hunting that I always thought looked really cool. And it was really cool, but I mean, it was a lot of work. We put, in 4-ish days, put 40 miles on the boots in the mountains, 40 miles all day, every day for 4 days. And I didn't see a single deer. Whoa. 0 deer. I covered a lot of ground and we didn't see a single deer. So that one was like an aha moment, like for the guys that do that and consistently get it done. And you have to have so many things go just right. Like really there is, you only have certain days in a given year, and only a few where you've got the right conditions. So maybe out of these guys have like a 2-week gun season or something. And of those 2 weeks, they might have like 3 days where you get the right amount of snow without it being too crispy or crusty to make a lot of noise, and have enough wind to kind of cover you up a little bit. And then you have to find a track, and then you need to actually catch up with that buck. And then that buck you finally catch up to has to be the quality you're looking for. And then you have to somehow get close enough. And then, oh, by the way, 99% of the time with that kind of hunt, these deer are on the move when you do finally see them, because they're jumping up or they're in between trees or they're running. So most of the guys that do that kind of hunting, I learned, take running shots. So like super low odds for so many reasons. So that was that was definitely an eye-opening experience, and one that, is not for the faint of heart. But also for that reason, it is something I'd like to try again, because it was, it'd be super fulfilling to actually pull it off.
Was that with Hot Blood?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, just like a legendary, iconic hunting figure in the Northeast, and yeah, that'd be so super cool to do.
Yeah, he was. If there was a movie about like Northeast Maine backwoods kind of guys like that, he would be straight out of Central Casting. I mean, he was the perfect character to play that part. The accent, the outfit, the attitude, everything he does. And not to mention, he obviously knows what he's doing too. So yes, a legendary character, a great teacher. Was really lucky to get to spend some time with him there.
Was there anything just from that specific window of last season, that specific hunt in the Northeast, was there anything specific that you learned, whether it's looking at a track a certain way, trying to tell the freshness of it or the size? Was there anything that you picked up on from him, or he passed down to you?
Yeah, I think really becoming scientific with tracks. I mean, that was something for many years I'd glossed over. And in recent years, I've tried to pay attention to it more, but he is really like a Sherlock Holmes of tracks. And I found that really interesting to see. And it really became fun to kind of play detective every time you came across a track and really dissect the details of not just the length and the width of the track, but also how splayed apart the toe pads are and how far apart the dew claws are and what's the distance between the left foot and the right foot and how tall or how long is the gait, what direction is this deer, how is this deer traveling through tight spaces, are there any marks on the ground where a deer might have been feeding, can you see antler marks in the snow? There's all these little tiny clues that I had never stopped to consider previously, that now after seeing the way he really tries to, it's like a story is written in the snow, right? And there's a book there to read, but 99% of us maybe look at the front cover and then just keep cruising. Hale really encourages you to open up that book and take some time to read each word and ask what it means. And I think that's something that I can apply to many more of my hunts, not just when I'm trying to track a deer down, but really across the board. There's a wealth of information there if you can slow down enough to look for it and then learn how to read it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Last season, I was lucky enough to spend some time with Dan Infalt in the big woods, and watching him scout and break down those little details is like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, why haven't I been doing this for the last 20 years? And as you said, it's a lot of the little minute details that everybody else overlooks. Is a deer walking through a tight spot? Are there tine marks on trees? Is a twig broke? There's so much of that. And it's really hard to kind of contextualize that and think about it on your own without it being inspired by somebody else or having a mentor.
To Chad's point and your point, Mark, I have not had that opportunity to be with someone that has broken that down, but I'm sure that's a skill that you can take no matter what state you're hunting and really slow things down and think in further depth. So you hunted a variety of locations this past year. Is there one spot when you left, you're like, okay, I'm okay if I never go back and have my bow in my hand?
Yeah, I hate to say it because I love the person that I was there hunting with, but it would have to be Washington, D.C. I mean, just a lot of why I hunt is because of the location, like the places, the getting away from civilization, getting away from the hustle and bustle and chaos of all that kind of stuff. But when you're hunting right in DC, right in the burbs over there, we're in Virginia. It's all of that stuff, but with the volume turned up to 11. So it's just chaos. There's a million things going wrong. There's people everywhere. It's not even fun to shoot a deer because you're stressed out about the 19 different properties it could run onto and the 19 different people that might be pissed at you or call the cops on you and all that kind of stuff. So there's certain things that are cool about it, and it's great to have the opportunity to be able to hunt there if that's where you live. But I'm a rural guy. I like to live in the farm country of Michigan or in the middle of nowhere mountains of Idaho. So DC is just not going to be my thing.
That's fair. What did you learn? Any hunting perspective? Any insight?
I mean, it's so unique there because the deer operate very differently from most other places. So I learned a lot about how to hunt deer in the suburbs. I mean, there's certainly some things that Taylor has got figured out there that absolutely work, but they just really, in many ways, don't translate to what would work, elsewhere. So I learned about how to take advantage of what deer are comfortable with there. So like deer really don't care about people walking in yards. So what I learned is that hunt on the edge of the yard. They don't care if you're walking along the edge of the yard. And if you set up in a tree right there, they don't notice that. Or, hey, if there's people mowing the lawn, that can be a good thing. Mowing the lawn, do all the stuff you want to do, get in your tree, get set up. They're so focused on the lawnmowers, they'll never notice you. So like things like that. But I just don't see that helping me in Michigan or Iowa or wherever else. So I learned a lot. I just don't know how much that's going to translate.
It's crazy how each area has those little nuances. And I guess that was part of the journey to go find all those different locations. What were some of the other states that you went to?
So I did Idaho, Michigan, Virginia was the DC one, Arkansas, Iowa, Nebraska, Maine, Wisconsin. I think that's everything.
Man, that's a lot. So did you know it was going to be overwhelming after you booked that? Because hearing all those states and knowing how short the deer season is relatively in terms of the rest of the calendar year, what was that like going into it? Were you preparing for a marathon?
I mean, yes, like it was one of those things, like I would say that out loud and then I do that. I know it's going to be crazy, kind of like laugh and like, oh man, it's going to be brutal, but it'll be awesome. Knew it was going to be crazy, but you don't really know what that will feel like until you're in it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was prepared as well as I could be. And my family actually did way better than I thought. Like my wife was the least annoyed with me she ever has been during hunting season. I don't know what that's about. Either she found like a secret lover that I don't know about, or she just like had the expectations. Like we both had an expectation going to last year, like this year's going to suck. We just kind of know from like how tough it's going to be from the family, me being gone for 9 or 10 weeks. Like this is just gonna be tough. And I think I made a point to try to like reiterate that over and over again leading into the season. So maybe we were just like both mentally prepared for that. But it was like there was times where I was really tired and like wore out. And then there were also times though, in every one of those hunts where I was able to like get out of that and just be in the moment and like realizing how cool this was and how fun this was and how awesome these locations were. So it was like a constant kind of up and down process throughout that where I could be in it, digging it, and then points where I'm like, man, haven't seen my kids in 15 days. This is kind of tough. So there was a lot of both.
Yeah, for sure. Chad, do you have any specific questions about that? Did you name that trip or that excursion or that series?
The series title is TBD. Like we had a working title and now we're changing it. So I don't know. That series is going to air this coming fall, starting September 2022. So I don't know what it's going to be called, but it's going to be the Whitetail show that MeatEater puts out in 2022.
Cool. Yeah, that'll be really interesting to follow. So you went to Iowa, and I know I applied for Iowa. Chad's applying for Iowa. What words of advice do you have for two prospective hunters going to Iowa for the first time with the tag in their pocket?
Man, it's great. It's super fun. But I think one thing about Iowa, for two reasons. One thing about Iowa is the expectations that we put on it. We put there's high expectations and high pressure you put on yourself. For one reason, that being like the hype that Iowa has, right? I mean, I think most of us look at Iowa as like the promised land. There's so much hype. And then number two, it's expensive and you have to apply for a long time getting those points, right? So you have years worth of investment of money and energy and time just waiting for this hunt to come together. And so for that reason, I think a lot of out-of-state hunters feel this tremendous pressure on that hunt, whether it is like they have to kill a certain quality of deer or they have to fill their tag or whatever. So like the only downside to like the Iowa experience, I think for me at least, has been that is like people go into it and they think, man, this is my Iowa hunt. I got to shoot a 160 or something, especially for people that have not hunted out of state a ton, but have like watched all the hunting media. I think a ton of people, live in Michigan or Pennsylvania or New York or Georgia, and they think, man, you go to Iowa and there's 150s behind every tree. It's going to be a piece of cake. I got to hold out for a booner because this is my Iowa trip. And even though Iowa is great, it is still hunting. And there's not booners behind every tree. So my recommendation, at least for me, would be to try to not put too much pressure on it and recognize like it's still a hunting trip. It's still, all the same things that apply in Ohio will apply in Iowa. Like stuff can go wrong. There might be a 7-day stretch where they're just not moving on your property or where crazy things happen. There are areas in Iowa where there aren't booners. If you have such high expectations that kind of hunt would make you upset or disappointed or bummed out, that's, I don't think, a good thing. I think that at least for me, I'm trying to get to the point where I can have a hunt in Iowa and not kill a big giant buck and still be able to look back on that 7 days and say, man, that was still a fun trip. That was great. I'm glad I did it. But because it's so easy to be thinking you have to kill this big giant buck because you're one chance in 5 years, that can be hard to do. So, for me on this trip I had last year, I had chances at some really nice deer, but I passed on them because I thought, man, this is Iowa. You got to hold out for the big one. You got to hold out for the giant one because this is the only place that'll happen. And, maybe I don't know if I entirely regret it or not. I'm back and forth on that one because I can see both sides of the coin. Like part of you wants to see what's possible. Part of you wants to see what the week has in store. But then I look back at video of like a super nice 140 some inch, 9-pointer with bladed G2s and think to myself, gosh, that would have been a chip shot. Great buck. Would have been pretty cool. And then you could have went and had breakfast and lunch with your buddies that were having fun the whole week. Like that. That's the funny thing is like in this Iowa trip is a perfect example of some of the things we talked about earlier. There's a big group of us that all get together out there. There's 4 of us or 3 or 4 of us from Michigan and 2 folks out there that live in Iowa. And so we drawn our tags. We were all there hunting, quote unquote, together, sort of. But all the other guys were coming in at midday and getting lunch together and like having a good time and getting together for dinner afterwards and enjoying themselves. And I felt like I couldn't do that. So I was hunting all day, every day. And like, there's something to be said for that, right? I mean, there's a reason. I don't know. I'm still working through this, Jake and Chad. But I mean, I know that it pays to put your hours in the tree. And there's something to be said about grinding and working hard to get that buck. At the same time, I think my buddies had a lot more fun than I did. They got together, they laughed, they enjoyed a couple breakfasts and told great stories, and they've got great memories. And I wasn't there for any of that. And I regret that to a degree too. So I think, if you're going to Iowa, my suggestion would be don't set too high of expectations. Have fun with it. Realize it's still a hunt and go get breakfast at least one time.
You've hunted all over the place, Mark, a lot of different states. If you had to pick one state to hunt as a non-resident every year, throw the Iowa, the draw out, just saying theoretically, if you could draw Iowa every year, go hunt it just with an over-the-counter tag, would you pick Iowa or would it be a different state?
It would not be Iowa. It would be, I don't know which state. It would be it'd be the Great Plains. So my favorite would be like if you could take North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Eastern Montana, and like that stuff and lump it into one section. Kansas, I haven't hunted Kansas yet, but I'm sure I'll love it. Like I love that habitat. Like there's great deer. I think there's in many places just as good of deer as far as like old bucks and big bucks as you can get in Iowa, but more open space, fewer people, more public land, gorgeous, wide open vistas. I love those long distance kind of viewing opportunities at deer. That's just like so much fun. So I've really I gravitate more and more to these like open country hunts. Because there's just a lot of really, really cool things about them. The landscape, the way you can hunt them, the way you can see critters. Not to say that Iowa's not great. It is, but I personally wouldn't say it's, 5 years worth of putting in money and waiting for that tag and, paying $1,000. It's not that much better than going and doing the North Dakota hunt or the whatever hunt. Maybe it'd be different if I owned 1,000 acres in Southern Iowa and had that farm, right? Like those guys can grow a totally different experience. It's great, but it's not night and day compared to these other places.
That's a fair assessment. My time in Nebraska, I really enjoyed look forward to getting back out there. I think your assessment on what makes it great is definitely fun, and I'm excited to get the Iowa experience as well. Hopefully a good one.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things about Iowa, not just the hunting, but if I were you, and it's a little late for some of this, but part of the coolest thing about an Iowa hunt is really everything that surrounds it. So like getting the Iowa shed hunting and scouting trips in, like, and really soaking in that, getting summer trips in and just driving around at night and just glassing fields for bucks. I mean, that's more fun than anything sometimes. So you really enjoy the Iowa experience when it comes to like that, because that is pretty different from some places. Although Southern Ohio, I've had some epic velvet nights in Southern Ohio. But I mean, and even like one of my favorite things about the Iowa trips I have done have been when I have filled the tag and I could just drive around during the rut and not have to hunt, but just get to go see it. Like all my buddies that filled tags early on this hunt, they would get up in the morning and they would just drive back roads all day and just see giant bucks chasing does, or, have a doe standing in the middle of the field braiding her. So, I mean, you can just see so much crazy stuff just happening off the side of the road. Big bucks standing with a doe, bucks fighting, bucks running across, just driving around and seeing the thing. I mean, it is a show out there. If you're not stuck in one single tree in the middle of a swamp and you can get her out and see stuff, like that's actually a really cool thing. So I've enjoyed that.
For sure. Yeah. I know you named a few states you plan on hunting this fall. Were there any other whitetail states that you'll be tackling?
So I'll be hunting at home in Michigan. I'm hoping to hunt Ohio again this year. I'm hunting Nebraska, North Dakota, and Texas. Those are the states I know right now.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So about half. Still pretty busy fall.
Yeah, I'm hoping to have like just one trip a month versus like 3 a month in some of those months.
For sure. Chad, do you have any questions about? I saw some notes that you had that you wanted to cover here.
Yeah, just before we get into those mashup questions, Mark, you've been kind of the leading voice or a big advocate for public lands over the last decade. I know that you're constantly making social posts, trying to keep everyone informed and kind of like up to date on everything. But I just, if you could give your opinion on like the current administration's view towards public lands, and if there's anything that we as hunters and all of our listeners and viewers should keep open eyes and ears for on the legislation side.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've got this kind of crazy pendulum effect within American politics when we go from one side of the aisle to the other, typically. Usually when we have a Republican controlled, executive branch or legislative branch, you're going to see good stuff for hunting and hunting access and firearms. You're going to see less good stuff for like protection of natural resources and the environment, and unfortunately public land protection too. Flip side, when you have a Democratic administration or legislature, you'll see, more threats to hunting rights and opportunities, firearm rights and opportunities, sometimes access, but generally pretty darn good when it comes to natural resources, the environment, and public lands. And so we're definitely feeling that right now, right? There's a lot of good stuff when it comes to things that will help keep clean air clean and keep clean water clean and keep public lands out there and protected. So there's many good things on that front. There's an initiative being pushed right now called the 30 by 30 initiative, in which the United States, along with a number of other countries across the world, are pushing to try to conserve 30% of our lands by the year 2030. And so there's a lot of good stuff like that. But on the flip side, we are seeing, a lot of, and this isn't necessarily top right now, but there's a lot of kind of state by state threats to hunting rights, all of these. And we're seeing, when there are issues of wildlife management starting to be made as ballot initiatives in democratically controlled states, where that, has that kind of slippery slope snowball effect that can impact a lot of hunting rights. So that's something we've got to keep an eye out. Even if you don't hunt for bears or if you don't trap, those types of things, I think, can definitely lead to more and more infringement on hunting opportunities and rights, even if you just deer hunt. So, I think right now that's one of the big things we got to be watching. But at the same time, I think we need to take advantage of the good stuff we have. So even if you loathe Democrats, I would say cheer on the pro public land stuff that is happening right now, and talk to whoever your representatives and say, hey, let's take advantage of this momentum and help conserve a few more things. Let's try to get a few more public land opportunities here. Let's get those things moving while we have the opportunity, knowing that we need to be watching our backside on this hunting stuff. And next time around, when we've got a Republican controlled executive branch or Senate or House or whatever, do the opposite. In that case, like, tell these folks, all right, guys, I love that you support my rights when it comes to my firearms. I love that you're pro hunting, but it's not okay that every time you guys get into the house or whatever, that you start cutting back every kind of thing that's protecting our clean water, or it's not okay that you keep proposing these ways to sell off our public lands. So it's just a never ending thing. And I think as hunters uniquely have an opportunity to talk to both sides. Because I think on the left side of the aisle, we can have credibility because we're very engaged with the natural world, and they can hopefully respect and listen to us from that perspective. We have a very strong conservation resume where we can hopefully influence positive change. And on the right side of the aisle, we have the strong history of, firearms and hunting and all these things that many folks on the right side respect and fight for, and they'll listen to us. So I think, I think hunters can convince Republican politicians to do good stuff for the environment, maybe more so than anybody else can. So we have a great opportunity on that side to try to, maybe what I'm really getting at here is to try to make, public lands and keeping our natural world healthy and intact and keeping wildlife out there. I think we can keep trying to make that a nonpartisan issue. Like, that's something that Republicans and Democrats both should be for and fight for. And I think we have made some progress there. And I think we as hunters and anglers have an opportunity to do that more. But it just takes paying attention. And then when you get that call to action, like actually doing something, send the email, make the phone call, talk to your reps, whatever it is, that stuff adds up. Every call, every email does add up. And there've been examples over the last 3, 4, or 5 years where we absolutely have made a difference. There's been good things happening that definitely would not have happened unless we made a ruckus. So we have power.
Yeah. The world of politics has become so polarizing the last, I don't know, the last decade. Maybe they've been polarizing forever. What do I know? I've only been paying attention to it
right
for the last decade.
But last decade does seem uniquely crazy.
But it's just, it becomes one of those things where it's very difficult for people to come together. But I guess, there are a couple good organizations that we follow. Howl for Wildlife, Sportsman Alliance, these proposed legislation. And even when this stuff goes to vote, it moves at such a rapid pace. It is really difficult to kind of keep pace with or just stay up to date. Are there any other groups outside of those two that you would, you would recommend for folks to follow or tune into?
Could you repeat who the two orgs were? I missed that part. Sorry.
Sportsman Alliance and Howl for Wildlife.
Yeah. So those guys are doing a good job, particularly keeping tabs on some of these hunting right issues that I mentioned with predator hunting and different things like that. I would tell you, I guess this is nothing new, right? I mean, I think the other organizations that I really like that are fighting more on like the land side of things would be like the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I love what they do when it comes to public land. Being a whitetail hunter, always look to the National Deer Association as another organization that, of course, is very focused on whitetail specific initiatives. But at the same time, I think they've done a really good job in recent years of kind of looking above and beyond that and partnering with folks and different organizations to really address wildlife issues kind of that are adjacent to whitetails, which I think in some cases has taken, some guts, which I can respect. The TRCP is basically an organization that has the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and their whole thing is bringing many different conservation organizations of different types together to address issues. So like they'll identify something like the fact that we've lost a massive amount of grassland habitat across the country in recent years. So they'll identify an issue like that and they'll say, okay, well, who are all the different people and stakeholder groups and organizations who maybe have a dog in the fight when it comes to grasslands. Well, people like to hunt pheasants care about that. People that hunt deer maybe care about that. People that love birds maybe care about that. People who love public lands maybe care about that. People like to mountain bike maybe care about that. And so the TRCP has been one of these orgs that's really about trying to bring these disparate different voices and people together to then, have a common kind of plan to address this. So that's really cool. And they do a great job of sending, I don't know if they're weekly, but bi-weekly or monthly updates on important issues and things like that. They're one of the better resources out there that kind of touch on a lot of this stuff. So those are a few that I personally keep tabs on and try to be involved with myself.
Yeah, a lot of good names, a lot of good folks in that hat for sure. What do you think, Jake? Do you want to get into like the hot seat stuff or the mashup questions?
Yeah, let's do it. So this is just a fun one I thought here. So out of all the people you've talked to, let's say you are in a pinch, and I think everyone has been in this where they get the picture of the deer they've been waiting to show up forever, or they had an encounter. And if you had to phone a friend for a specific whitetail advice, could be anywhere in the country, like this, who are you calling? You have 30 seconds to phone a friend and pitch them on what you need.
I'm very lucky in this that I've got like some of the best in the world that
Literally.
I can reach out to. But my two phone a friends would either be Andy May or Tony Peterson. Those are usually my two go-tos.
So you have phoned them in instances in the past?
Oh yeah. Like we frequently talk throughout the season about situations. So I'm lucky to have some great mentors there to bounce ideas off of.
Cool. Well, I probably would have guessed those as well with your answer. But I'm just thinking, like you literally have the Rolodex. Like you have you call up pretty much anyone. So that's cool. That those are the folks you settle on. So
who would you say, Jake?
I just thought of the question here today, so I haven't put any thought into it. I don't know. Okay, so when do you start typically setting up your trail cameras? It's May. People have a lot of opinions on this. So when are you setting up your trail cameras for whitetails?
So it's usually July is when I used to run them year round. I still do run some year round, but July is when I get really excited about it and get them out. Now, the only kind of unique thing has been living out west now for part of the year. I don't get to go back to the Midwest till August. So by necessity, it's switched to August. But even out west, I used to put cameras out west in July.
It's coming right up. Okay, so what about this? So you have been battling this. You bring it up kind of on your Iowa trip of just hunting really hard. But can you kill a deer from the couch?
Yes.
How so?
I would say that there is something to be said about timing. So you can't entirely kill a deer from the couch. But I used to definitely be of the mind that you had to like kill deer by brute force. Like you just had to hunt nonstop all the time, every opportunity you had. And like, that was the only way to get it done. The older I've gotten, the more experience I've had, the more I've come to appreciate the value of a few really well-timed hunts, a few very well-planned hunts versus 7 mediocre hunts. So sometimes that means staying home. Or sometimes that means just hunting a lower key spot until the right time to hunt your best place. So the answer is in between, but I'll say yes, being on the couch sometimes is the right move.
Do you think you have to go through brute force strategy to come to that realization, or do you think you can come to that realization without the inflicted pain of just grinding?
I think it's not 100% necessary, but I think it helps to get there in that kind of way. Because I think if you went the opposite way, if you tried to start, thinking you could just hunt a few times, like that would be a lazy approach in a certain way. I think if you come to it trying to first like work your way into deer, it's easier to learn how to work smarter. I think that's an easier transition to make than thinking you've got it all figured out and kind of lazily hunting just a few times a day. And then all of a sudden realizing you got to work harder. I'd rather approach it from the latter approach.
Okay, fair enough. What does deer camp mean to you?
Oh, deer camp is the best place in the world. I mean, deer camp is about the people you're with. It's about storytelling, and it's about eating the most unhealthy food that you would never tell your wife you're eating for days on end. That's what deer camp's about for me. And then drinking a little bit too, if we're being honest.
What's one of your favorite foods that you only have in deer camp? What is a delicacy in deer camp?
Well, I can't say something I only have, but we always get a lot of Oreos. There's a lot of Oreo action going on in deer camp. There's a lot of chili dogs and pizza. Well, it depends on the deer camp. Like there's like my traditional family, Northern Michigan deer camp. And that's where it's like chili dogs and Oreos and donuts and that kind of stuff. And then there's like my modern, like with my buddies deer camp, which is like when we're all hunting down in Southern Ohio, sleeping in like a $40 a night hotel room, packed like 5 of us into one hotel room. And then we're getting like 2 large cheese pizzas every night and drinking out of like 2-liter Pepsi bottles. That was my 20s. And those are pretty good days too.
Awesome. Okay. Chad, I'll let you ask this matchup question.
All right. Last one. When it comes to building a hunting arrow, do you prioritize speed or mass, or is it somewhere in between?
Man, I'm more of a mass person. Definitely have learned to. I'm not going to be the speedy arrow guy because I've learned that I don't want to draw a super heavy bow either. So I've been all about comfort and then knowing that when it hits, it's going to hit hard. I shoot a 60-pound bow. I want to not be thinking about the bow at all when I'm drawing and shooting. So I'm not going to be the person that's muscling back a 70-pounder and, wanting to have a super, super fast arrow. I don't need to shoot long distance. I don't need to do that kind of stuff. I've more and more come to appreciate simplifying things.
Yeah. What is heavy? What is heavy to you?
As far as drawing back my bow?
No. As far as arrow weight.
Oh gosh. I think my arrow was like 560 or something like that. Is that
okay? So you're not going to the extreme, the extreme end of what some people are with 700, 800 grain. Okay.
Not that far. No, but I will tell you, like, I'm just not that, I'm not the gear freak either. Like I find something that works and I stick with it. And I'm not the tinkerer on the gear end. I'm a tinkerer on like ideas and strategies and like deer behavior. But when it comes to like my arrow setup, even my bow setup, those things, like I've got a guy and I go spend a day with a guy and we work out, make sure my arrow is set up right for my bow and how that's shooting. And then I don't touch it for as long as I possibly can because I don't have the engineering mindset. So I've kind of leaned into the stuff I'm good at, and then I've outsourced the parts that are just not going to work in my head to the people that are good at them.
One other last question. I think we might have asked it last year. I don't remember if we did or not. So you were self-employed forever. Wired Hunts, the baby. Now it's a couple years with MeatEater. What is that like? Because as a self-employed person now, there's always the thought process of, man, that'd be really kind of weird or just different. What's that like?
Man, it's not even just a couple of years anymore, Jake. It's coming up on 5 years.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Holy cow! All right, well,
January.
Been in the trenches.
I know. Isn't that crazy? It was January 2023 will be 5 years of MeatEater, which is insane. I can't believe that. But it's been a really good thing in a lot of ways. I mean, coming into this, I was worried like that I would. One of the risks was that I would lose control of my baby and that it would be like desecrated. That was a thing I worried about. Another thing I worried about was just losing my autonomy. One of the things I loved about being self-employed was being in control of my own stuff and my own schedule and the direction of what I was doing. On the flip side, the idea of merging into this larger network was that I would have the opportunity to learn from people that are smarter than me and can push me in new ways. I'd have resources on a totally different level to do bigger, more interesting, more impactful work. And I would just learn a ton. And what ended up happening was that I really have had those opportunities, or I've had the opportunity and the resource to do things I never could have done on my own. I've got to work and meet a bunch of people that I've learned a ton from. I've grown a ton over the last almost 5 years now. And I've largely still been able to keep that autonomy that I loved so much. I've largely been able to keep control of all the things that really matter to me. So like anytime you become a part of a larger thing, like there's going to be complaints here and there. Like there's certainly things they'd be like, I wish that didn't happen. That's annoying. There's going to be all those things. But zero doubt in my mind, it was the right choice. And I can look back on the past 4 years is a good thing for me personally. And I think for my career.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just always curious. My apology. It shows you how fast things are going.
I can't believe it either, man. It's been a flash.
Cool. Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to discuss all things here whitetails today. Anything you want to plug here as we finish up?
I would just say, like I mentioned, the new Whitetail show, TBD on the name, that's coming September. That'll be on the MeatEater YouTube channel. And otherwise, just, wired to hunt across the board. We've got videos on the YouTube channel. We've got 2 podcasts a week, wherever you get your podcasts. We've got a whole slate of really good deer hunters who write articles for our Wired to Hunt website these days. So there's a ton of whitetail stuff out there. So if you've consumed everything that you Exodus guys have put out there and you're still looking for more, check out Wired to Hunt.
Cool. Certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.